Welcome to the show, Lucy Lawless. Lucy, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
No, look, we're very excited to have you. We are speaking to you today because of a documentary that you have just directed.
War is an amazing feeling. Part of me wanted out. I was sick of it. But Margaret didn't seem to feel the same.
On Kiwi female news camera woman, Margaret Moth. Amazing movie. What drew you to the story? Why did you want to do a documentary on Margaret Moth?
I had no interest or intention of directing anything. And I got this email, a cold call one day from Margaret Moth's best friend, Joe Duran. And he said, look, I've got a suitcase of Margaret's memories. Do you want to make a film about her?
Wow.
And this weird alchemy happened inside me, and my mind went right back to 1992 when we were all watching the news. I don't know if you are cognizant of this moment where Margaret Moth was shot in New Zealander, CNN shot, it was so shocking. And I was obviously fixated to the TV, and everything I knew about Margaret must have come from that report. And I immediately wrote back and said, yes, I will find the money. I will find the producers. We will get this made. And then I hung up and just went, holy shit, Lucy, you have no business saying you can do these things. Like, I've never done this before. And,
well, if this is the first time view, I want to see more. It's a pretty good first time effort, I've got to say.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, you don't do it alone. I have producing partners and editors and a researcher, and the people that you interview are collaborators in a way, so I think where my biggest contribution was about attitude to all the players and what constitutes the truth as I see it. Some people said some stuff that I just knew with other data I had coming that's not actual. It's not fair for me to put that in. That's not right. Or this person has an axe to grind, and I know, so that's where my sense of my deal with Margaret lay in that I would only tell what I believe to be the absolute truth without fear or favor, and not sugarcoat it too much, or at all.
Because surely that lifestyle is a little bit of a, have you seen the size of the fish I caught? That must be a part of that world, the size of the fish that I caught somewhere. There must, those stories that come out from within wars and within those areas must do that at some stage.
I've seen that only from one person.
Okay.
Who was big noting. I think looking back, he wanted me to make a film about him, but it's like, sorry, the New Zealand Film Commission is not making a film about you, brother. Anyway, the truth is so big that they cannot possibly reduce it to mere words or mere concepts, because it's so complicated, and you have to be living there 40 years to get a sense of the whole organism, like conflict as we see going on in the world today.
I'm interested in all of the footage that you used. Like there was one bit of footage quite close to the start where a camera person, because I don't know if it was Margaret or not, was on the back of a truck and people were shooting up into the air. Is that all Margaret Moth footage, or is some of it Margaret Moth with other kind of pertinent footage from that incident interspersed?
No, some of this stuff, especially in the beginning, it's clear. Some of it is clearly from the incursion into Ukraine.
Yep.
Margaret's been dead since 2010, right?
Of course.
So it's not, because he's talking about war generally, so we felt we could do that. We struck a lot of problems with Margaret's footage because in those days, camera people didn't get credits. I don't know if they do today. They didn't get credits. Plus, they were shot on this massive, beta tapes. So they're editing them in the field, and they only send the finished package back over satellite to CNN headquarters or whatever. The rest is either taped over or destroyed. They could not store it all. So when I went looking, it was really frustrating, and CNN really tolerated a lot of irritating queries from us out of sheer love of Margaret, thank God. But that was the reality. So I tried to make sure that all the footage comported with her press passes and her visas, and things that I knew she was at, like incidents I knew she was at. You can hear her voice, but no, there's probably a lot of other people's work. I knew that. I admit it.
Yeah.
But in order to take you on a great ride, that's what I chose to do.
Do you know one thing I was surprised with? I was surprised, it's a bit silly, but I was surprised with how much footage there was of her shooting footage. There was lots of photos and film footage and all of her filming. Is there any story to that?
The stuff, there's so little. I'm so shocked to hear you say that.
Okay.
What we did have was stuff after Margaret had been shot that was done for the Cameron Bennett and the Holmes show.
Right.
They they went to a lot of trouble to go to Istanbul and film her, even got her doing some stuff in Afghanistan. But evidence of her on the job was really scant. Her talking, there's only one thing of her talking before she was shot, and that's when she's about to jump out of an airplane, and they filmed her. I think that's actually Christchurch. I think that's Christchurch when she was jumping out of hot air balloons with a parachute.
Yeah. I was going to ask that question. I mean, maybe it's a redundant question, but completely addicted to adrenaline? Is that what the sense you got of it? Just an adrenaline junkie? Or is it more about the job and what she wanted to put through that lens?
I think it's a little bit too easy to say that. It's not that. I think that she was so hungry for sensation and to fill her boots with something. You know, I heard this word on a podcast, and my husband said to me today, "What does that word mean, imago?" And I think it is when your demon or the things you didn't get as a child affect your behavior later in life. And I think it was something maybe like that, where there was so little love and nurturance in her upbringing that she was like filling herself with just crazy experiences.
Could it also be the idea of feeling anything is better than feeling nothing? If you're getting nothing from your parents,
could be, yeah, that's
feeling
nice.
so,
Like
even
that.
if it's fear or adrenaline or love or sex or whatever it is better than. I mean, they talk about kids who sometimes act out, and they're like, sometimes the kids who act out, maybe they've got stuff in their past where they haven't received what they needed from an adult figure,
Right.
and so receiving even negative stuff is better than receiving nothing at all.
Right. And I think she saw it all as wholly positive. You know, I don't think she saw herself as ever hurting anybody. She's just going to, fill her boots. But it was a little bit like feeding a racehorse delicacies. You know, it was not really going to. It sustained her for a long time. But when she discovered war, that was the be all and end all for her. And I think through all that, through war and through the trauma of war, she found a way to live a life of service instead of just a life of consumption and excess.
It made me think as well about the difference between the 90s and today when it comes especially to war footage. Do you have any sense, or from talking to people who knew Margaret, what she would think of seeing footage today? I mean, we see things happening in Gaza, but more often than that, you see the effects of war from Gaza from someone's cell phone that's gone onto the internet. There's there's no entry to getting these footages out there anymore. Not like they have to. Do you get any sense as to what she or the people around her would think of how war, quote unquote, war is reported today?
Well, I don't get the sense that any of them resent it, because in my albeit limited experience, the people I've met in the last 3 years through this job, they believe so much in the purpose. The reason they're there is to tell the stories of the non-combatants of war. So if the non-combatants are sending up evidence, they're all for it. I'm not saying they're saints or anything, but they are trauma bonded to that job.
That's an interesting phrase. Trauma bonded.
So when something kicks off, like the day that we talked to Christiane Amanpour was the day that Russia invaded Ukraine.
Wow.
And she and Joe Duran, who were both, we were interviewing them remotely. They were in London in the Margaret Moth boardroom, actually.
All right.
At CNN in London. And they were on tenterhooks. It was very generous and a lot of self-control for her to sit there and give us 40 minutes of her time, because those people are scintillating, because they know that their colleagues are facing incredible hardship and possibly death,
Probably speaks to what
maiming,
she
all the
thought of
stuff.
Margaret as well. Like that should give you that time about Margaret on that day.
Yeah, all entirely for Margaret. Yeah,
Yeah.
they had a lot of regard for, not just for Margaret, they have a lot of regard for one another. I was quite impressed by them, actually.
You talk about telling the stories of the non-combatants. I've written down some quotes from the doco. One that said, "You can't cover war remotely. It's about people." That was like a really impacting one. And there was another one. The BBC female camera operator said, "If you
Susan
don't
Stein,
film,
yeah.
if you don't film, things carry on. If you do film, things can carry on, but they can change." And I think it was Christiane Amanpour saying what was seen through Margaret's lens, literal lens, was something that helped change the course and made people look at the actions of war to potentially help in the long run.
I think they're really heroic. You know, what's done with their images at the other end, how it's extruded out through the network is a whole other question. But those people, I've settled on this point that there is no self-interest in what they do.
Wow.
They just live to be there and to tell the truth, even if it means that they could die. I know that they feel they'll be at peace with that.
Do you feel like after this, and you've just said 3 years, do you think like you know Margaret? Like, do you understand her?
I don't really. I mean, I don't feel like I know her.
Yeah.
I feel very connected to her, but I don't feel like I know her because I can't relate to just about any of the choices that she made in her life. She's
Sure.
a different kind of being, and I don't know if that is part of a personality thing or a genetic thing or something to do with, I don't know, some sort of disordered thinking on her part or mine. you know
Yeah.
so she is, to me, a real sphinx. I think she'd like that too. She had a real thing about Egyptian cats and things, and that's why
Right.
she designed her makeup that way, to look like an Egyptian cat. And yeah, she's a sphinx.
I wonder if it's like the no regrets kind of vibe that you got from what came through the screen at least. I wonder if that was always the way. Like, I think she either said or someone retold the story about I'm not a breeder, having to getting her tubes tied and having to get, I guess, medical permission to do it. I wonder if that sat with her all the way through
Judicial.
her life. Like, yeah, completely.
She
Got
went.
got towards the end of her life and went, nah, that was great. I don't need that. That was not a part of who I was.
Yeah, but here's one thing that I feel that I know about her. Her friends may disagree. I don't know. This is what I feel I know about her, is that she's a concrete thinker,
Right.
a really concrete thinker. So, like, I don't know if you'd taught philosophy. I don't think she'd have any time. She would find that like she had zero time for religion, nor did her father,
Right.
nor did her siblings. For talk about spirituality, I'm not sure where she would sit on philosophy, but because she read all that stuff, she was a voracious reader, but she just saw that stuff as so much indulgence, and even things like PMT or hangovers. She felt like that's completely craven self-indulgence, and she had no time for it. Didn't suffer them. She was different.
It's funny. I mean, I don't know if this is accurate to say or not, but there's this idea that kind of men are a bit more analytical and women are a bit more logical. Not that it has to be that, because it's a spectrum. And it talks about how well she got on with all the army blokes and how well she got on with General Schwarzkopf of all people. And I wonder if she had sort of a male-esque
concrete thing.
Yeah. Thinking.
She's a bit of a dude. I asked somebody, yeah, was she a bit of a dude? They were like, yeah, I think maybe she was kind of a dude.
Yeah.
I think it was that concrete thinking suited her down to the ground. She didn't want anybody like blubbering, or no, poor me. She didn't get poor me as a child. If she fell over and got a what in America they call a boo-boo, it would be just like, well, just watch out next time, you idiot, kind of thing. I don't know about idiot, but zero nurturance.
Yeah. So maybe the idea of no kids was actually the best conversation. Zero nurturing.
Yeah, well, I think she felt like she might not have it or didn't have it in her to give, but she did things like animals. She had 25 cats, which poor old Joe Duran inherited. and like she would cry about a pussycat who was under a tank in war. I mean, it's not going to get squished. It's just the tank's just sitting there, but she's going to get under that tank and save the pussycat, sort of thing. And also very lovey-dovey with her boyfriends in a way that shocked her family and friends. They'd never would have thought she was capable of that kind of woody woo kind of stuff.
Well, there was a scene in the movie where one of her boyfriends broke down in tears and said, you sat down with her and when you got up, you always took something away. I mean, that shows nurturing, the giving of herself as the person's walking away.
Yeah, she did. And she kind of put him through art school in a way, but an unofficial art school. Like, she taught people stuff, and she really brought a lot of young women along in the business. She would always stop and explain things. And so, yeah, there was a kind of nurturance, but it was more in the way of a teacher than come here and let me, stick a plaster on it.
Yeah. You showed some art within the documentary, like scratchy scribble drawings. Were they hers or were those just representations?
No, those are hers.
Because they're
Jeff
amazing.
had them. They're amazing. Jeff had them in his attic, and actually Joe who was her soulmate, they were best friends, platonic but best friends. He was shocked. He'd never seen anything quite like that before from her. And and I really went digging for the origin story of those drawings, but I asked her siblings, so did you have stairs in your house? Did you have a grandfather clock? They're like, no. And I was trying to find, there had to be the kids under the stairs that she drew is so creepy. I was like, there has to be some horrible kind of abuse somewhere. I could never find it. I don't actually believe that she was sexually abused, but your mind wants to go there when you see those pictures because they're so horrifying 1970s era drawings. Reminds me of this TV show. Remember that Midnight's Children or something where that little girl would draw a house in the 1970s shows? Not Midnight's Children, something like that. And then it would come true. She'd enter her. Anyway, it was like that, just creepy drawings that Margaret did. And and Jeff gave those to me, so it was amazing.
I trained to be a teacher, and I did a section at Starship Hospital. And as a part of the section, so for people who don't know, you go out and you do like time working at schools. In the Starship Hospital, there's a school, and I did a section at the Starship Hospital. And one of the days they took me to the part of the hospital that were with kids who had really serious mental health issues, depression and suicidality and all that kind of stuff. And one of the teachers showed me a picture that a girl had drawn on the day she arrived, and it looked like Margaret's pictures, all black, all dark, it was a clown, like the clown from hell. And then he showed me the picture of the clown when she left, and it was the big red nose, purple hair, all colours. It's really interesting to look at this kid's journey through their own mental health from when they arrived to when they left, from dark and under the stairs and horror-like to kind of it was just, it's fascinating to see what's behind the art, eh?
Yeah. It was just how she saw childhood. It was something not to be replicated.
Yeah. Like, I guess if you get your tubes tied, you can't be responsible for replicating it, can you?
Yeah. I think she kind of didn't want to turn into her mother.
Do you think her parents didn't, it's kind of said out, I don't know if it's blatant, but it sounds like the parents are saying, we would rather not have had kids. Yeah, if the pill was around, we wouldn't have had you. So they actively did not want children.
No, and he would keep knocking the mother up. That's how she felt, that every time she nearly got to leave, when the kids went to school, she could nearly leave, that he would knock her up. That's the way that she expressed it, the mother. But there was lots of suicide in the mother's history. Her own mother committed suicide. And I would have liked to have gone into that, but ultimately the story's about Margaret. You've just got to draw a line. But really interesting history of neglect and abandonment. And Margaret was just it stops here.
Wow. looking and studying and reflecting on Margaret, it did make me think as I was watching the documentary, hearing about her family, going, how much are we made up of nature versus nurture? Like, how much of this concrete thinking for this person, how much are they just naturally, I said analytical, but concrete thinking, that's the way it is, and how much because of their upbringing of abandonment and non-connection creates that? I mean, I don't really have a question around that, but I just found it a fascinating thought about, would she have been a different person in a different family, and what would that have looked like?
Who the hell am I to say? I would, okay, since we're just shooting the shit here,
Yeah.
and clearly we cannot possibly know, I would
No.
say she would be, because she would be more at ease on City Street. Do you know what I mean? Like, there wouldn't be so much to fight, so much to run away from. She was very proud of being from New Zealand, but she stayed away for like 40 years because of the family thing. And they're such nice people. I love all the Wilson kids that I met. I love them one-on-one, but the damage, they're all siloed off from one another because of this dearth of love. You know, do you remember Romanian orphans back in the, was it the 80s? The story about kids and orphans in Eastern Europe who had never been cuddled, so they never developed the capacity for empathy and things.
Yeah.
Something like that. There's some watered down version of that. Kids who just don't get cuddled.
It made me think as well that like there's a part of what makes us who we are is also how people treat us. And I was thinking when it's like she rejected the blonde hair, blue eyes, and she went to the dark eyes and black hair, what was she putting out there, and how much of that was a part of how people were then treating her? Like, just in general, it's, I just think, I mean, like, it's funny you say she wouldn't have a bar of philosophy, because I think like the philosophical conversation around Margaret Moth would be fascinating and what's going on there.
I don't know that. She might have been able to talk philosophy, but certainly not spirituality.
Right.
Zero. You know, she encountered a lot of misogyny and crazy stuff in Dunedin, I'm afraid. Stuff which would have been fascinating to put in the film, but I just couldn't prove it was true, and it would be definitely impugning the names of a few formerly high-profile individuals.
Right.
Yeah, and also the people who told it to me didn't want to be responsible for telling it themselves, you know. So I'm not an investigative journalist. I'm presenting people telling their own story, and I think they would like me to have told it, but that would require a lot more resources than I had.
I mean, what else did you leave out? What ended up on was there anything, I should say, that ended up on the editing floor that you're like, no, maybe I should have included that? Was there anything else?
Lots of stuff. All the New Zealand stuff was really neat. It was, and really fun and really wild. But also it was not debated, that's the word. Other people would said it wasn't true. Do you know what I mean? Right. So I couldn't nail down and go, this is the truth. For example, one of the stories was that in her locker at TVNZ, some guys would put bloody dolls indicating like menstruation or something in her locker. It's like, okay, now that's a really tasty story. That's like, ooh, poor Margaret, how mean the men were in the 1970s, right? But I talked to her New Zealand best friend. He was like, I was there. I'm just telling you, those men are just not like that. I just cannot corroborate that. And I was her best friend. She would have mentioned it to me.
Yeah.
So, for example, things like that. Lots of very tasty, very interesting stuff. But ultimately, we felt that the strongest place to start the story was mystery woman shows up in 1980s Dallas during an oil boom, can remember nothing about her past. Well, that's a lean in. That's a hook. Do you know what I mean? That makes people go, we love people who can't remember anything about their past. So it's really a hunt for who is this woman, and then who is she really? And then who is she now? So it just keeps, it's chercher la femme. And I feel like that's a really important thing for docos about an individual. If you have the individual too available, then there's no tension in it. So you always want the audience sort of leaning in on the hunt, being involved in hang on, who's telling the truth? Who's a reliable witness? You know,
Yeah.
they get to make up their mind what the story's about.
I'd like to ask you a little bit about some of the movie making decisions you made. It's funny because I was watching this and I was thinking, you know, for, I don't know, first half hour, whatever it was, it's all real footage. It's amazing. There's no recreations. And then you had the bit that came out about when Margaret got shot. And when Margaret got shot, you used I'm assuming it was CGI, this bit here that we're looking at on the screen right now.
No, diorama, bro.
Is that actual models?
Diorama, yeah.
That's what I was going to ask. Is that CG or is it actual little models?
It's actual models. And you know what's good is that I happen to be drinking from the cup that inspired the whole thing. I had one of these cups. We were talking about the diorama and, okay, what are we going to do for backgrounds? They're like, can't afford backgrounds. What do you mean? You can afford nothing. Well, what about green screen? So we can, you know, make a horizon or whatever. And they're like, you can't afford it. And I said, what can we afford? They go, a black curtain. And I had this cup and I just went, perfect. Okay. Right. So, and they said, you can have 3 colors. 3 colors of what? 3 colors, period. So your people are going to be one color. Your buildings are going to be another color. So, apart from Margaret, who's a little bit painted there, the others are all sort of a horrible greeny gray color. In Sarajevo, the buildings are grey, and in Lebanon, the buildings are this sort of biscuity colour. That's because that's limitation kind of can become style, as you will know well, I think. But,
yeah.
That's money, economics were what forced these choices.
Look great. I mean, like, honestly, it made a part of it, because I'm someone who kind of goes, recreations, don't like recreations, but because you made it so overtly a diorama, and to display it felt like kind of looking down on the war zone, like a general about to move his things with his big long stick going, this happens there. And so it actually really, really worked. I really liked it.
That was actually one of the inspirations. One of the producers was like, because it wasn't my idea. Matthews was in love with the war diorama in Canberra. And he was like, you know, make it like that. And I was like, wow, I'm a kid of the 70s. We remember dioramas. It's so old, it's cool again. And my dear friends down at Weta, Richard Taylor and Ben Milson, they came on board because they have much bigger fish to fry, but I think they really dug the Margaret thing, and they leaned into it and made it possible. I'm so grateful, because it was big. It was a big scale thing. And to make it Sniper Alley look so long, you have to have buildings of different scales, and so it looks like they're far away, even though they're only 20 feet. It looks like they're a kilometre away. Yeah, clever stuff.
That forced perspective idea.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
After she was shot, and obviously all that came with that, do you think her kind of fear of death dissipated, or do you think that she didn't change? I'm thinking specifically about the story where Hezbollah launches the rockets at the bottom of the building that they're in. All the CNN people go, holy shit, let's get out of here. They can't find her because she's gone to the roof and she's filming to see if the IDF are going to send missiles back. Is this just like a death wish, no fear of anything, or is that just how she always was? And as you're investigating her? As
I'm investigating her, she never had a death wish. She had a life wish.
Okay.
But I think if death was coming for her, she's going to film it. She's going to look you right, death, you bitch. I'm going to look you in the eye. You know, you came for me once before. I'm going to film you as you do it. And I think also she thought there was a calculated risk that they wouldn't come back, or they might do a flyover and she'd catch her. But I think she thought, no, she'd probably be okay. But other people made a run for it because, you know, the IDF don't play.
So it sounds like you're saying that she probably in that moment made a calculated risk rather than a death wish.
Oh, Margaret always felt that she was making a calculated risk.
Right.
She would calculate the risk. But some of her colleagues disputed that. But Margaret always, and she was right. The only time she was ever hurt, she was sitting in the back of the van with her colleagues. It wasn't her decision of which way to go that day. That was the producer's decision.
Right.
And it was a fatal one for Margaret.
Gosh, that puts a different spin on it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I wonder,
she never was wrong about it.
Yeah.
Never
interesting as well.
on the job. Yeah.
So she didn't have a death wish. Do we have any idea as to what she actually thought about death? Like, even was there a change pre being shot to post?
I can't. It's that concrete thinking
Yeah.
element that is why we get hung up on this, because you just can't imagine being so black and white about something like that. But I
Yeah.
think she was. And if there wasn't a complete turnaround, it was just that it just strengthened her desire and her commitment to eating life, just having as much fun and being pleasing herself, which often meant being alone, smoking a cigar and reading a book. She took a lot of time alone, and she pleased herself.
She certainly comes across as someone who lives every day as it's their last, which, you know, in some theory we all should, but she lived that way, and it might have been her last because she was in a war zone. So it did it both ways.
Yeah. I think there's a real piquancy when you know that that you're on borrowed time. I think every day that she had, once she decided to survive her that catastrophic injury, was extra, and I'm sure she loved stealing that time off death. You know.
Yeah. Wow. Because there was another part where it talked about, and I'm not quoting it, I'm just, you know, roughhousing it, that she wanted to be where people were doing something wrong, where she wanted to be filming people doing something wrong. So she was always out for the victim, for the vulnerable, for the one that was being hurt and harmed unjustly.
Yeah, there was a line that was taken out that I really regret it was taken out, that she wanted to lift the lid on the military complex. And when we're saying that, the pictures that you're seeing are actually long-range missiles and, you know, Scuds and shit, you know? And yeah, I at the time I was like, oh, I missed that line, but then just things got busy and it never got put back. But so yeah, no.
Because, but she also
could see.
But she also had this life where she sat and smoked cigars with General Schwarzkopf, and arguably you could say that wasn't sitting where
concrete,
you know, the vulnerable.
You know, she was not. She would see getting all political and she would see that as so much wankery. Like, she would never go and sit with the other journalists at dinner and talk about, you know, the forces, forces that be, and make judgment pronouncements about it. She was not into that at all. She was just about cold, hard truth and showing it. And it was later on that she softened, particularly to the kids of war. That was her focus in the end.
Which is again interesting, based on that I'm not a breeder.
Yeah,
you know,
she found
not
her
maternal.
children eventually. Yeah.
If Margaret was still here today, and obviously if she was, she'd be at a certain age, but let's say she was doing her gigs all as she could at her peak for the Israel-Gaza situation, where would she be? Where would she be filming?
Well, you know, she lived in Ramallah.
Yeah.
Spent a lot of time there, and in Jerusalem, but in Ramallah, because that's where people understood her and she felt comfortable there and valued. And yeah, I imagine she would have first have gone straight to Ukraine, and then she would have gone straight back to Gaza and covered that. She just wants the hardcore truth out there and make of it what she didn't care what you made of it. You know, she was not interested in your opinion about anything. She was interested in showing it as it was. There's that concrete thing, you know.
Yeah. Do you know if she ever got kind of pissy with how CNN then treated her photos? Because after she sends it on, like you say, they can do what they want with it. Or is her job done and she's okay with whatever they do?
She would never look at it.
Okay. So
I mean,
she
they
wouldn't
would
even
edit
know.
it in the field. Well, they would edit it in the field, so they'd know what went out, but that wasn't her concern. She wasn't, you know, generally not part of the editing process, at least not early on. And she was about observing it and shooting it and giving that material to whomever. I don't think she
something.
didn't see herself as a saint, you know. She wasn't into that.
She was the eyes on the world that,
A cold eye.
yeah,
Yeah.
but that she was our eyes on the world, ours being the
Yeah.
people who weren't over there. And it seems that her primary focus, as you're saying, was being our eyes. This is the footage where there was that example of, you know, a crowd of civilians being shot on and all the journalists stuck down, and she was the one standing up filming. You know, she was the eyes to send back for the rest of us to see, and that was it. Hey, like, it wasn't without fear nor favor. She was the eyes.
That's exactly right. And to be a cipher, and
Yeah.
not to put a slant on it. And I tried to carry that through with the film, you know, not to put a slant on anything. Just show it as it is and let the audience have their feelings, you know, sift it through their own history and nervous system, and come away and hopefully discuss it with the person next to them and have a good chinwag, because their experiences don't quite line up.
Lucy, I know that you're kind of politically active. You put out thoughts and ideas of what you think and believe. I wonder if you, because obviously you were more involved in it, like me, were watching some of the footage or sifting through the footage around the Middle East when the IDF trucks were crashing into the CNN vehicles, the TV vehicles, and go, this feels like it could have been filmed last week. What's changed in the last 30 years?
Yeah, shocking, really shocking. When October 7 kicked off, my first thought was, wait, what? How many people are doing what? They took the scale of it kind of blew your mind.
Yeah, insurmountable.
And then my next thought was, oh my God, don't they know what's going to happen? What inevitably happens when, like, that whole thing at Kana was because 2 Israeli soldiers were kidnapped and taken. And, you know, what unfolded, that denouement was, exponential is not the right word. I don't know what it is, but it seemed inevitable that this was going to be so much worse than we could even imagine, and it is worse than any of us imagined.
Do you think that we still get serviced well by our news media with those, you know, cold eyes, no perspective, as we did with people like Margaret Moth? Do you reckon it's the same today?
Yeah, I do. I think they're the same people. I mean, I
Yeah.
know they're the same people. I was just sitting with a bunch of them last month. A lot of them are still working. Matthew Chance is in Moscow. He came to the film. He was a great friend of Margaret's, and he, you know, he's been a big voice on what's going on. And good old Cameron Bennett's still doing it, isn't he? He met Margaret a few times. So they are literally the same people.
Yeah. And they still do the news, no fear or favor.
Well, yeah, but those people do. The people who are on the front line, they're not there for the good of their health, are they?
Yeah.
That was part of my secondary desire for this film, is that it would bring some honor to that profession, because those people are amazing.
Yep.
And they are so under threat. They're so disrespected because of how, you know, feel about mainstream media, and rightly or wrongly. But those people are giving it all up to tell the cold hard truth, and it's up to us to make up our minds what we're going to do about it.
Yeah. Fascinating. In this age of spin, it's fascinating that we still have those people who are at the coalface are doing that no fear or favor journalism.
Yeah, even though there are people out, citizen journalists with their cell phones, you still need people who know how to feed it back, who know how to process it, you know, and are connected to all the other players in the region. And we need them. We need them terribly.
Hey, Lucy, thanks so much for giving us some time today. I just have one more question for you. I'd like to know what lesson or lessons you have learnt from Margaret Moth through this process?
That you don't have to be a perfect person. You don't even really have to be a good person to live a pro-social good life. And then we're not here long. Eat it up. Eat it up. And stop worrying what people think about you.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff that goes with it's a lot of stuff that goes with Margaret. But she's she might not have been, she was no angel, you know, but there's something redemptive in her story, not just for her, but for all of us, that you can learn to leave the world, try to leave the world better for you having been here, or die trying, you know.
It's a pretty nice place to end on. Can we just do this as well? The doco's coming up at the New Zealand International Film Festival. How else are people going to get to see it? Is this going to have a general audience release? Is it going to go to somewhere like Netflix? What's the plan?
Actually, no, it is supposed to have a general release in main centres. I don't know what that means because it's sold to different territories all over the world. So does that mean New York, LA, London, Auckland, Dunedin? I don't know what that means. But anyway, it is going to be in cinemas. But the film festival, it seems like it's going to play pretty widely here. So I'm really thrilled that it's getting some exposure here, because we made it. It's made for New Zealanders, about in New Zealand, it's by New Zealanders, and the fact that it's the world sort of scooped it up immediately is amazing. But really, it's for us.
It's
She's
an
our
amazing
least
story.
known famous person.
Yeah, it's an amazing story. And thank you so much for sharing it with us being the country, and thank you so much for giving us a bit of time today to talk about it. I can't wait to see it again. I watched it by myself yesterday, and I told my partner all about it, and she's like, I want to see it. And I went, I want to see it again too. So
it's great in the cinema. It's a whole different experience because the sound design is very involving and works on quite a gut and subliminal level. It's quite, it's a cool thing about cinema.
Congratulations on your first role in directing. Do you have plans for more?
Yeah, oh God, yeah. I mean, I've got plans. I've got plans up the wild, man. I'm working on 3 scripts at the moment. I want to work with actors now that I'm like, okay, all right, okay, got this. I understand the story thing now, but now actors is what I understand really well. It's hard to find it's hard to find anything that wants to be funded. It's a bun fight, but you got to be up for it, and you got to be a powerhouse like Margaret, and just storm on.
Yeah,
it's the only chance you have of making anything happen at all.
Some concrete thinking needed.
Yeah. Hey,
Hey, Lucy.
Did you hear that Jeff died?
No.
Jeff died at Christmas. He never got to see the film.
Oh.
But he was such an important part of it, and he was became a very dear friend through this process. And it made his life. It made his life, and it put his little heart back together again.
Oh, nice.
And I think he just,
Because that idea about when you spend time with Margaret and she leaves, you keep a little bit, but I guess you also give a little bit away. It's kind of a transfer to and fro. And I imagine, with no criticism, the kind of life she lived of in and out might have taken big parts and given big parts depending on what part of the cycle you're in, a leaving or a coming part of it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I'm going to have to think on that.
Yeah.
I think she tried to prep people to not, have unrealistic expectations, but maybe she had some herself. I don't know. That's the fun thing, that you get to make up your mind who she really was.
Yeah. Well, look, congratulations again. It's a fantastic movie. Everyone should definitely see it. And thanks so much for joining us today.
Pleasure. Thank you very much. Love your work. You and Chewy, love your work.